in the middle of the biggest drought, basically on record. And and then these men are trying so hard to keep these animals alive. And then you get a dog involved in it, and it's just like utter despair.
We probably did just those mating programs for 2 or 3 years, and then found that we just seemed to still have the same number of dogs each year. And that's when we decided to get a professional trapper in. Once we did that, some of those areas never had any activity for another 18 months. So it was successful. The landholders could see the success that we've had. The major challenges we do have today is probably absentee landholders, and that's some overseas people that own land now. We also have people that live in Sydney or somewhere that own land in here. They don't run stock, there's no manager on a lot of these properties. So it's very hard for us to get information on what is actually happening on those properties. But just recently we have seen a few new landholders come into the area that want to run sheep, and as soon as we explained our program to them, they've jumped on board straight away. So, we're starting to really feel confident that the people are accepting the fact that they've got dogs and get in and do some control for it. Yeah, well, the national awareness has been happening. These people that are actually coming in seem to already be conscious of the fact that there's probably dogs in the area.
The workshop's exposed us to a lot of professional trappers where they could give us a head start on just areas to look, the understanding of how dogs work, etc., and what to really look for before the attacks actually start. So they were giving us a jump start, which really worked out great for us. It is starting to really pay off now, because a lot of the landholders that I have gone and spent time with now are really getting a lot better at trapping. They're catching their own dogs. They're not so more reliant on having to get professional trappers or the Shire having to get trappers in for them. So they're a lot more independent. They're a lot more confident in the way that they trap. It's really helped us along a long way.
The main problems that we see with wild dog control is that we've had a full generation of people that have never had a dog problem. So it's a major learning curve for all those people, and we've been trying to educate them on what to look for and what sort of control they should be doing and so forth. That's where it's got to now. Yeah. Without the actual funding that we've been able to get through the federal and state government and the National Wild Dog Action Plan and AWI on doing education programs on trapping workshops, how to identify sign and corridors and work out where you shouldn't and how to set traps, our landholders will be just miles behind still. I mean, that's been a great improvement for us, especially on the basis that we now do have a lot of landholders that are actually quite good trappers, and they're doing good control programs on their own properties now. But without that education, we'd be another 10 years down the track before we got that way.
Up here at Cliffdale, which is the property of Peter Lucas, as you can see, it's fairly undulating, rough country, low scrub country. He's actually not far from the boundary of the Paroo Shire to the north of here, and his issue has been consistently with dogs moving in from other areas, particularly in the northern shires where dogs are less controlled, and move down these north-south corridors. There's a significant number of drainage lines and creek lines, the Paroo River, the Warrego River that moves from north to south and form corridors for dogs to easily end up on their property. And as a consequence of that, despite their very good control program, Peter and his neighbours have decided to enter into a cluster fence agreement and fence themselves in to avoid those dogs and the impacts they cause.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, fencing is the most expensive way to do dog control, but it's through frustration more than anything else. Probably more for security. Even though the Shire-based program is a very good program, we've also, to the north, we have very low participation rates, and we still get reinfestation from dogs. The problem I do have with cluster fencing is the fact that not everyone can afford to have a cluster fence. Well, mainly because quite a bit of the Paroo Shire is very low carrying capacity, so more arid type land.
But I think that the cluster fence would be good in our high value country where you're breeding ewes and things like that, because we have smaller amount of country. So it would be really good.
The beauty about the cluster fences, and I've said all along, I mean, fences don't kill dogs, but we push them somewhere else, but they are good barriers for us to be able to bait along and trap along and pick any of those dogs up as they filter down through into other country. It's a lot less area that we're going to have to chase dogs over, so that's where we do get a great benefit out of it.
I think with the electric fence, the coordinated baiting program and a trapping program, yeah, we're still going with sheep. So I can think, we can continue.
But baiting's given us another option, another option that we didn't have before, because there wasn't any option other than trying to trap them, but you try and feed animals all day and then you've got to trap them as well. It's just something's got to give.
If the cattle market collapses, well, we've got sheep and we've got goats.
Yeah.
Goat market collapses, we've got cattle and sheep, vice versa. It's the wild dog program that's allowed us to do that, because, you know, it gives us the diversity.
The Paroo model was such a good example of how you could deliver cooperative and coordinated management in a rangeland environment like this, that we brought the National Wild Dog Advisory Group to Charleville back in 2010 so that people in other states could see what could be achieved by working cooperatively to manage dogs over such a large landscape like the one we're in here today. On the bus trip of the National Wild Dog Group members to Cunnamulla, as Peter was talking about the benefits of getting rid of all the foxes and dogs and all the wildlife they've seen, the bus driver pulled over and demonstrated that there was a pair of Australian bustards, or plains turkeys as they're known out here, with 3 chicks running beside them on the side of the road. Something that many of the locals hadn't seen in this part of the world before 2003 when the baiting program commenced.
It's not only the dogs that we actually take out through our baiting programs, but we're taking out most of the foxes and the feral cats and so forth. And we're now seeing animals here that, to our knowledge, have never been here. We actually got a Rufous Batong on our property. It's never been recorded here ever.
Our bird numbers, and specifically our plain turkeys and brolgas, they're building up and they're now becoming common instead of being rare.
And blue tongues.
Blue-tongue lizards.
A lot of blue-tongue lizards now, which we never saw before.
Producers in this part of the world and out in Western Queensland are fairly tough. They're hard. They spend all their time working out in extremely hot and dusty conditions. But once you get to know them, you start to realise that one of the hidden impacts of wild dogs and stock attacks is that the emotion and stress that they feel and the impacts that has on their family. A lot of these guys have been breeding these sheep and the lines of sheep for up to 50 and 60 years. There's tremendous pride in the livestock they produce and the wool that they produce. And being able to manage this country in a sustainable fashion. So the thought of being forced out of the sheep industry because of wild dogs, because they can no longer manage the impacts, is a real emotional stress and drain on a lot of these producers. And whilst they might not show it publicly, once you get to know them and deal with them, it really is one of the reasons that I remain in this role and can do the best that I can to try and help those guys forge a way through that and deliver a program that reduces those impacts. And as you can see from the response of the people we interviewed in this video, that they're in a position now where they're confident, they're energised about the future, and they're looking forward to handing over their properties to the next generation in a condition and economically, operationally and sustainably that the next generation can pick up and run with for the next 50 to 60 years.